Okay, before anything, I don't know what the fuck is going on with my hair. I've tried everything I can. I even put some gel in it. But I don't know what it's doing, so I'm just gonna have to have it like this. Tucker Carlson is a man who is famous for his facial expressions. I can't even do it. He's a right-wing host on Fox News who does a lot of debates, interviews with left-wingers predominantly, and he owns them, and he crushes them, and he destroys them, and he turns them into a small paste, and then he puts them in his tea, and he's not British, into his coffee, and then waters his garden of liberal anguish with it. If you listen to the right on this guy, you would think that he is an absolute monster in debates, using facts, reason, logic, triggering power to trigger the libs into a state of triggered that they need safe spaces. Every lib he owns makes the collective conservative panty moister and moister. Okay, I'm gonna stop with the descriptions. A little backstory: Tucker Carlson, as a pundit, started on CNN, where he was on Crossfire, and famously got pooned by Jon Stewart.
I have privately, amongst my friends, and also in occasional newspapers and television shows, mentioned this show as being bad. And I felt that wasn't fair, and I should come here and tell you that I don't, it's not so much that it's bad as it's hurting America. So I wanted to come here today and say,
wait,
here's just what I wanted to tell you guys.
Yeah.
Stop. Stop hurting America.
Okay.
Your partisan, what do you call it, hacks.
Wait, John, wait, let me tell you something valuable that I think we do that I'd like to see you do.
Something valuable?
Yeah, no, it's nice when politicians,
and
I'll tell you, when politicians come on,
yeah,
it's nice to get them to try and answer the question. And in order to do that, we try and ask them pointed questions. I want to contrast our questions with some questions you asked John Kerry recently.
If you want to compare your show to a comedy show, you're more than welcome to.
Here's the point. If
that's your goal,
no, it's not.
I wouldn't aim for us. I'd aim for Seinfeld.
Here's the problem.
That's a very good show.
Kerry won't come on this show. He will come on your show. Let me suggest why he wants to.
Well, we have civilized discourse.
Well, here's an example of civilized discourse. Here are three of the questions you asked John Kerry.
Yeah.
You have a chance to interview the Democratic nominee. You ask him questions such as, quote, how are you holding up? Is it hard not to take the attacks personally?
Yeah.
Have you ever flip-flopped, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
Didn't you feel like you got the chance to interview the guy? Why not ask him a real question instead of just suck up to him?
Yeah, how are you holding up is a real suck-up. And I actually was giving him a hot stone massage.
It sounded that way.
As we were doing it.
It did.
You know, it's interesting to hear you talk about my responsibility to the, you know, I didn't realize that, and maybe this explains quite a bit.
No, the opportunity.
Is that the news organizations look to Comedy Central for their cues on integrity. So, how old are you?
35.
And you wear a bow tie.
Yeah, I do.
So this is...
What's it like to have dinner with you? It must be excruciating. Do you like lecture people like this, or do you come over to their house and sit and lecture them? And, you know, they're not doing the right thing, that they're missing their opportunities, evading their responsibilities.
If I think they are.
Look, I wouldn't want to eat with you, man. That's horrible.
I know, and you won't.
Not long after, Crossfire was cancelled by CNN, but Tucker said, "They didn't fire me, I quit. I resigned from Crossfire in April, many months before Jon Stewart came on our show, because I didn't like the partisanship, and I thought in some ways it was kind of a pointless conversation. Each side coming out, you know, here's my argument, and no one listening to anyone else. CNN was a frustrating place to work. No one listening to anyone, After that, he had a brief run on MSNBC before being cancelled for having low ratings. So he was kind of in the wilderness for a while, a few years, because he's very whiny and had a stupid bow tie and just irritating frat boy kind of nerd, you know, persona that nobody wanted the guy. So in 2010, he founded the Daily Caller, which is a kind of right-wing response to the Huffington Post, and it's a very partisan right-wing hackery website, kind of like Breitbart Light. And while he was in the wilderness, I think a lot of people, including myself, were wondering, like, why are you not at Fox News? That is where you belong. You are a right-wing partisan hack. That is your home. Go to your home. Hilariously, years later, Tucker was asked about the appearance of Jon Stewart on his show.
And if you go back and look at the tape, I haven't, but I remember it pretty well, I don't think he said anything intelligible or worth hearing. You know, you're bad for America, okay. you suck up to politicians. Well, that's about the only sin I've never committed. I mean, the one thing I've never done is sniff the throne of someone in power. I find that repulsive. I've never done it. He has. He would have politicians on his show, and, you know, if he agreed with them, John Kerry, for example, Barack Obama, right before the presidential elections in 2004 and 2008, he would ask them, you know, why are you so wonderful? Is it hard that people are so mean to you? I mean, I felt like he had an obligation to ask a little tougher questions. I may have asked questions that were too nasty. You know, that's probably a fair criticism, but I've certainly never sucked up to anybody.
Jon Stewart sniffs the throne of those in power. I've never done that. I've never sniffed the throne.
He wrote this: Wilders understands that culture and demographics are our destiny. We can't restore our civilization with someone else's babies. Well, King's comment was denounced as bigoted by many, including the Speaker of the House, but he has not apologized. Congressman King joins us tonight to explain. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Tucker. I appreciate it.
So Steve King is a Republican congressperson, and I'm sure that Tucker is not going to sniff his throne because he holds people in power accountable.
So you've seen the reviews, obviously, of your tweet, and the left was merciless. I mean, some of them were unbelievable. John Lewis called you bigoted and racist. Anna Navarro at CNN said you're an embarrassment to the human race. The Speaker of the House, your speaker, said he'd like to believe that you misspoke. Did you misspeak, and what did you mean when you wrote that?
The left is so mean to you. And did you misspeak? And if so, could you please correct the record so that you look better?
No, Tucker, I didn't misspeak at all. I said exactly what I meant. And this is a message over to Europe, over to the Netherlands, a message to Geert Wilders, who does understand this. But the birth rates in especially Western Europe, but also Eastern Europe and in the United States, all of Western civilization have gone down below the replacement rate, with the exception of Israel, is the only Western civilization, first world country that has a birth rate that's above their death rate. And so we have to do something to increase our birth rate, or the vacuum that's created will be filled by people that don't believe in our values here in Western civilization. And we're seeing it happen in the Netherlands and all across Europe. And that's a lot about what the race is about that's coming up here in a couple of days in the Netherlands.
There's a lot to unpack there. So I'm sure Tucker, because this is a person in power, is not going to sniff his throne. What do you mean people who don't believe in our civilization or our culture? A lot of people hear that as a dog whistle for race. How do you refute that claim? I mean, that's not even like a tough question. Let's see how Tucker does it.
So the solution to that in the United States has simply been to import people from other countries, and that increases the population, despite the fact that the birth rate of native-born Americans is pretty low. That's not an adequate solution. You say, why?
So you say bringing in foreigners from other countries is not an adequate solution? Why is that? That was a little bit less tough than what I had said.
Everything you said, I think, is defensible and probably right. The problem with the tweet was that it suggested there's a racial component to American identity. Do you think that there is?
Well, there's a racial component to all of our discussion here in America, and there must be that because the left is constantly pointing to the differences we have. What I should have done, Tucker, if I had more characters in that tweet, just added, you can't rebuild our civilization with somebody else's babies unless we adopt them.
So the idea is it doesn't matter what ethnic group the people come from as long as they share the same culture and language and shared history? Is that what I don't want to lead you to that, but is that what you're saying or not?
No, that's...
Basically, Tucker's tact in this interview is, are you saying this or you're not saying this? I want to be fair to you. Gotta be careful. Is this fair? Okay, it is fair. Oh, how about this? So what you're saying is this? Is that right? It seems a little bit throne sniffy.
And that's what we've got to restore is Western civilization for the world, Tucker.
Sounds fair to me. Congressman, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Tucker. Appreciate it.
I may have asked questions that were too nasty. You know, that's probably a fair criticism, but I've certainly never sucked up to anybody.
Maybe there's another interview with a Republican congressperson where he's being tough. Let's see. It's gotta be something. What's this? An interview with Republican Congressman Louie Gohmert, one of the stupidest people in Congress. He's not gonna let him off the hook just because he's a right-wing hack, is he?
Congressman Gohmert joins us tonight. Congressman, thank you for coming on.
Great to be with you, Tucker, anytime.
So, look, the last year and a half has taught us that nothing is impossible, and so I'm open-minded about everything. But it's a pretty heavy charge. Why do you think it is true?
You say you're being surveilled. Nothing's impossible. I have a very open mind. Wow, tough opening.
Well, actually, I've been told by a number of different people in a position to know that, you know, you're being watched, you're being listened to, and, you know, you just brush it off. You can't let those kind of things control your life. And then I did a 48-page expose on Mueller, and it really came home as I prepared that, my gosh, this is their mode of operation. This is what they do. I'm told by one of our folks that they know everybody that walks through your office door before they get to the door. So, you know.
They being whom?
That would be the U.S., well, FBI intelligence. I didn't ask for a they, but I've had people in those departments tell me, you know, they're watching, they're listening.
So Louie Gohmert, Republican right-wing congressman, is claiming that the Department of Justice is bugging his phone, his emails, monitoring his phone calls. On what evidence? But I'm sure Tucker Carlson's going to hold his feet to the fire. He's not going to sniff that throne.
For whatever you may take.
Well, wouldn't that be... look, again, I'm totally open-minded.
Yeah.
I don't want to believe it because it seems like that would precipitate
that's my case.
A constitutional crisis. They're not... You're a member of Congress elected. These are bureaucrats unelected.
Right.
You serve in an oversight role over them. If they're spying on you, then, I mean, the whole system falls apart or is falling apart.
I want to believe it. I really want to believe it because that would be a constitutional crisis. Am I going to challenge you about it? Oh, yes. Maybe?
They're spying on a presidential candidate or a president after he's been elected. Those kind of things, it turns out, were going on. But I sort of mentioned, I told a private group of our intelligence folks, either you get us the names of those people who unmasked all of those people that should never been unmasked, or I'm going to make it my life's work to get rid of this program that allows you to do it. And I'm not saying this is why, but very quickly they did come out with the names. We knew, you know, Susan Rice, Sally Gates, folks like that.
Okay. So here comes the challenge. Are you going to ask whether there's any evidence of them tapping his office and communications?
Right, and I think we're better for knowing those names. Congressman, thank you. And I hope that if you find out any details in this,
and they're not going to scare me.
Amen.
Thank you. We'll keep moving on.
Congressman Gohmert.
What? Okay. That one didn't pan out. He sniffed the throne there. We'll try one more with a right-wing person and see if he sniffs the throne or not. I'm sure he'll hold their feet to the fire.
Can California be saved, or is it too late? John Cox doesn't think it's too late. He's a Republican running for governor of California. He got his nomination last night. He'll be facing Gavin Newsom in November, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Cox, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you, Tucker. Thanks for having me. You grew up in California. You lived the California dream, and now the California dream is to figure out ways to get to Texas. We got to change that. Gavin Newsom would run this state even further into the ground.
So what would you, and it's sad even to report on it, but it matters. It's the biggest state and it's a bellwether state. There's so many problems with California. We could go on for the rest of the week on this, but if you were to narrow it down to one thing you could change about the state to keep the middle class from fleeing, to keep the state from going bankrupt, what would it be?
Well, I have to say it was the tax burden primarily. The gas tax has been really a problem.
Okay, so that was just a glorified commercial for this gubernatorial candidate.
I mean, the one thing I've never done is sniff the throne of someone in power. I find that repulsive.
Now, why am I making this video? Because recently I fell into a life slump. Nothing to do, nothing to care about, no one to talk to, just a lonely, miserable life. And I got through it by watching Tucker Carlson. I don't know how I got onto that. And after watching a number of his debates, I couldn't help but wonder how it was that this guy is so continually owned by his guests, how he uses such dishonest gaslighting techniques, he strawmans, he gets flustered, he gets annoyed, he gets whiny, he gets offended constantly, and he regularly fails to find any in on an opponent's argument. How it is that this guy is held up as some owner of the libs who's constantly demolishing left-wingers. He does occasionally talk to somebody he gets the better of, but that is pretty rare. Only by looking at this guy through a conservative right-wing lens could you possibly think that he is owning people. I understand that I will be accused of having a left-wing bias. I think that's true, but let's go through some of these techniques that Tucker uses and then try to tell me at the end of the day this guy's actually doing a good job. Maybe it's just the low expectations people have for someone someone like Tucker Carlson and for left-wingers in general that they believe that these are owning sessions of the guest and not Tucker kind of owning himself constantly. First, we're just going to start with a famous interview that he did with a professor who is pro-Antifa or anti-fascism, who has a very, very long neck, just because it's famous, and it gives us a taste of what Tucker Carlson is all about.
Whenever conservatives want to speak on campus or hold a rally, Antifa groups are a reliable presence, and they routinely try to stamp out speech using vigilante violence, which they perversely justify as a form of self-defense. Mike Isaacson is a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He founded the Antifa group Smash Racism DC, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you for having me.
I would say straight off the bat, Mike Isaacson has lost. You cannot have a neck that long on television, especially on Fox News, and be for Antifa, and have anybody think that you've won this exchange. This exchange was famous because everybody was like, Tucker Carlson wrecked, destroyed, owned, crushed the giraffe man with the huge neck, and that he's for Antifa, and Antifa is evil, and they're satanic, and they eat babies. So automatically, Tucker Carlson has conquered all, and he's a genius. But when I originally saw this interview, I thought that the long neck guy did pretty good. Like, he did quite well, and Tucker Carlson didn't do a very good job of finding an in where he could really attack this guy.
So your position, tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this, is people you define as fascists do not have free speech rights.
No.
So straight away, he's like, your position is people you define as fascists don't have free speech rights. The guy's like, no, that's not what I think. Now, remember how nice and cuddly and friendly he was with somebody in power, Representative Steve King, where he kept saying,
Is that what I don't want to lead you to that, but is that what you're saying or not?
Let's see if he maintains that charitability with Antifa guy.
Defend themselves against violence or defend themselves
against violence? I mean, we were talking about...
No, but physical violence? So if I say, for example...
We're talking about a history, a group that has a history of enacting hate crimes. Yeah, no, we're not... Are we going to pretend like we're suddenly in this ahistorical world where Dylan Roof or Wade Michael Page doesn't exist, where Anders Breivik doesn't exist? Are you kidding me?
No. Are you really a professor, by the way?
What?
Are you really a professor? What has that got to do with anything? I don't like your points. I'm just going to cast aspersions on the idea that you're a professor. Louie Gohmert.
The concept of self-defense is a legal concept, but it's also got like a long history and tradition in common law. So the idea is if I'm hitting you, if I strike you physically, if I physically commit violence against you, you have a right to commit violence back in order to protect yourself or your property.
Sure.
But you're seeming to say that anybody who has espoused ideas that have at some point in history led to violence can be the subject of violence from you. You're not saying that.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I believe it is the right for communities to get together to assess what is a threat to them and to defend themselves against that threat.
So again, he comes back around to, so you're saying it's okay to commit violence against people and stuff. And he's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. So he's not listening to the guest and he's sticking to the straw man that he's building in stark contrast to how he treated Steve King.
So give me an example. Like, what public figure in America right now could be shut down, could have his free speech rights taken away, and could be the subject of violence under the standards you're describing?
For the third time, he's like, so you're talking about violence. You want to commit violence. You're all about the violence. It's violence that you want. You want the violence.
Well, I mean, for instance, I think that the framework here of talking about violence as opposed to talking about preserving the very freedoms that you and I both enjoy is a false one. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about a movement that actively advocates against all the fetters of democracy. I mean, we're talking about Richard Spencer, who publishes in altright.com, publishes an article on July 28th by a man named Vincent Law, where the headline was, "To protect free speech, get rid of democracy." So we really have to...
You know what? Okay, so let's use that example. I disagree with that. I haven't seen the piece, but it doesn't sound like something I'd agree with.
It's not.
The long neck guy actually makes quite a good response and says, I don't agree with the framework of violence. I do agree with the framework of attempting to preserve the rights of people who are being attacked by fascists.
But long term, are we even pro-free speech?
No, of course not. But we have to use this platform in order.
So we're being radically honest here. And,
yes, radically pragmatic. Yes.
I'm honestly not following you.
Are you pretending that you don't have security?
Well, I actually don't have security, but there is security at
there's security
our building,
in your building, for sure.
And there's security at lots of buildings.
And the reason that there is security in your building
is...
No, the reason that you have security is because ultimately that security provides a space for nonviolent civil discourse, which is ultimately what we want.
Oh, no, slow down. There are a million distinctions here. But you don't own the public square. You
no,
don't own the street.
But I believe the public owns the public square. And at the end of the day,
you're not in charge of the public, and you're not in charge of deciding. The public isn't even in charge of public.
In another video we're going to look at, he goes gangbusters against a Democratic congressperson about him having security. And just the ease with which he changes his talking points to their polar opposites is a little bit fascinating to me. Now, I don't think the Antifa professor interview is the most interesting because it wasn't Tucker at his worst, but it is a good example of like an interview that became very famous that Tucker didn't generally do a very good job in, but the expectations for him are so low. And we do see some of the trademark Tucker prickliness towards the end of the interview. He's desperately trying to get the upper hand, so he just turns into a douche, which is what he always does.
We don't have representation by the state. We don't.
Okay,
like, this is something you have to understand.
Question. Do you teach students?
I do.
Huh. And do you teach them that the First Amendment does not apply to people they disagree with?
I teach them to think critically, and that's why I'm very open about my anti-fascism and my anarchism.
So if someone in your class said, you know what, I'm a Trump voter, I'm against affirmative action.
I've had those, and I encourage them to research and explore and hold them to the exact same standards that I hold any other student.
Yeah, I bet.
I do.
Yeah,
I had
you. Oh, you say that you're a great guy, but if you had a Trump person in your class, you would treat them badly. Wouldn't you, you evil leftist?
I had an alt-right supporter actually in my class last semester. Yeah. I worked with him on his papers. He started off kind of bad at citation. I got him better at citation, and he wrote a paper that was an A paper. I mean, I am not discriminating against my students.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
except you think that people you disagree with should be beaten up, but whatever. All right, Congressman. Close, Professor. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Still sticking with the straw man he's had since the start of the conversation. So basically, Tucker's position is, if I like you and I want to sniff your throne, I'm going to be so careful to make sure I am being fair to you and not straw manning. But if you're an Antifa dude, I'm going to doggedly say for the entire conversation, so you want to commit violence against people. Oh, so what you're saying is you want to commit violence against people. Oh, you want to commit violence against people? So what you're saying is that you can destroy the free speech of people you disagree with. That's what you're saying, isn't it? That's what you're saying, long neck man.
But you're saying
you think that people you disagree with should be beaten up, but whatever.
You think people who disagree with you should be beaten up, whatever. On to the next segment. This is why the Democrats are so evil. So some of the trademark Tucker conversational techniques are in this one, except you're saying you would eat human flesh. 500 pronouns. That's how many pronouns that they say we have to know. More coming up.